Most people respond to disruption in exactly the same way. They work harder, they learn another tool, they add another certification, they take on more responsibility, they stretch their hours. That instinct makes complete sense. For most of modern professional history, effort worked. If you tried harder, you usually got ahead. If you became more skilled, you became more valuable. And if you stayed reliable, your career moved forward. But increasingly, that logic is breaking down. Not because people stopped caring, not because people stopped adapting, but because effort is no longer where leverage lives. That's the shift most professionals are running into without fully realizing it. People aren't failing because they didn't try hard enough. They're struggling because the system changed underneath them, and they kept optimizing for rules that no longer apply. And when you don't see that clearly, it's very easy to exhaust yourself doing the wrong kind of work. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Thomas Schmidt, and most of my career has been spent inside organizations, working with leadership teams, building systems, and watching how decisions about roles actually get made. And I've seen this from the inside, across different industries, different company sizes, and different technology shifts. And one pattern shows up again and again. Careers don't rise or fall because people stop working hard. They rise or fall because leverage moves. And once you understand how leverage shifts inside organizations, a lot of what feels confusing or unfair suddenly starts to make sense. Okay, let's dig into it. If you've watched the previous video in this series, you already understand one important idea. Roles don't disappear randomly. They disappear structurally. Not because someone failed, not because someone didn't adapt fast enough, but because the organization no longer sees the role as central to outcomes. What most people misunderstand is why this happens, and why trying harder often doesn't cause any change in outcome. To see that, we need to talk about how careers used to compound, and why that model no longer works the way people expect. For decades, professional careers followed a fairly predictable logic. You gained experience, you developed expertise, you became more efficient, you earned trust, and over time that compounded. Skill accumulation behaved like compound interest. The longer you stayed in your field, the more valuable you became. That model worked because it rested on three assumptions. First, expertise was scarce. Second, organizations were relatively stable. Third, change moved slowly enough for experience to pay off. All three of these conditions have eroded, however. Today, skills replicate faster than they differentiate. Tools absorb execution, processes standardize expertise. Inside organizations, skills haven't disappeared, but their role has changed. They've shifted from being a source of leverage to being a baseline expectation. You're expected to be skilled just to stay in the conversation, which means the question organizations are asking has also changed. It's no longer, what can this person do? Rather, it's where does what this person does actually matter? That difference is subtle, yet it's decisive though. How organizations actually evaluate roles. Well, this is where most people fundamentally misunderstand what's happening. Organizations don't sit around asking questions like, who's talented? Who works hardest? Who deserves to stay? Those are not the questions that determine outcomes during disruption. Instead, leadership teams ask very different questions. Where's value created? Where does risk concentrate? Which functions shape decisions? Which functions execute decisions that are already made? Those questions drive restructuring, consolidation, and automation. This is why strong performers are often left blindsided. Performance reviews evaluate execution. Restructuring evaluates architecture. These are two very different systems. Someone can be excellent at execution and still be exposed if their role sits far from decisions, ambiguity, or value definition. That's not personal, it's structural. And once you see that distinction clearly, many career outcomes stop feeling random, even if they're still difficult to accept. A concrete organizational pattern. Okay, well, here's a pattern I've seen repeatedly inside organizations. Two people can have similar experience, similar performance, and similar tenure. One spends most of their time doing things like executing defined work, delivering against clear requirements, and optimizing efficiency, while the other spends time framing problems, clarifying trade-offs, operating upstream of decisions. During stable periods, both roles are valued. During disruption, however, they diverge sharply. Execution roles get optimized, automated, and consolidated. Decision-shaping roles get protected, not because one person is better, but because one role carries leverage. Organizations don't protect effort. They protect decision clarity. The execution versus the decision-shaping divide. This leads to the most important dividing line in modern careers. It's not junior versus senior, technical versus non-technical, manager versus individual contributor. Rather, it's this: roles that execute decisions versus roles that shape decisions. Execution roles focus on delivery, reliability, and efficiency. Decision-shaping roles focus on judgment, context, and direction. Under pressure, these roles behave very differently. Execution roles compress. They get standardized, they get automated, they get consolidated. Decision-shaping roles expand. They become more valuable precisely because uncertainty increases. This isn't ideology. It's how organizations survive volatility. They protect clarity, they protect judgment, and they protect context. Execution is necessary, but execution alone is increasingly replaceable. Another way to think about this is how organizations behave when pressure increases. When things are calm, efficiency matters, delivery matters, output matters. But when uncertainty rises, efficiency alone stops being enough. Leaders don't need more output. They need better judgment. They need people who can explain why something matters, what the trade-offs are, and which risks are worth taking. That's why roles tied only to execution become fragile during change. They answer questions that have already been decided. Roles tied to judgment survive because they help decide which questions matter in the first place. The only career advantage that still compounds. So what still compounds? Not hours, not hustle, and not raw skill. What compounds is contextual leverage. Contextual leverage means you understand why decisions are made and not just what decisions are made. It means you help define the problem before solutions are chosen. You connect actions to outcomes. You operate where trade-offs exist. This kind of leverage scales because it reduces organizational risk. It can't be automated easily. It can't be outsourced cleanly, and it becomes more valuable as systems grow more complex. Organizations don't eliminate leverage. They eliminate replaceability. And contextual leverage is, by definition, difficult to replace. Why this advantage is rare? Well, contextual leverage is uncomfortable. It requires sitting with uncertainty. It requires speaking before answers are fully formed. It requires owning incomplete problems. It requires visibility when outcomes are debated. Many professionals drift away from this without even realizing it. They become indispensable executors. They get rewarded for delivery. They take on more work. They solve problems that are already defined. And over time, they move further from decisions while feeling more productive than ever. And that's the trap. How professionals lose leverage without noticing? Well, this doesn't happen suddenly. It happens gradually. People say yes to more execution. They become the safe pair of hands. They optimize for reliability. They avoid ambiguity because it feels risky. And eventually, they're respected but not consulted. Busy but not influential. Valuable but already structurally exposed. And from the outside, it looks like stability, but from the inside, it's quiet erosion. Most people don't even recognize it until restructuring forces the issue. Why mid-career professionals are especially exposed? Well, this dynamic hits hardest in mid-career, not because of age, but because of role evolution. Experience often pushes people towards operational excellence, reliability, delivery leadership. These are valuable, but they can quietly reduce leverage if they aren't balanced with decision proximity. The more experience you have, the more dangerous it is to become invisible at the decision level. That's why so many mid-career professionals feel blindsided. This is also why experience can quietly turn from an asset into a liability if it's not paired with leverage. Experience makes you faster. Experience makes you more reliable. Experience makes you better at execution. But if that experience pulls you further downstream, away from decision-making, away from ambiguity, away from framing problems, well, it increases exposure instead of reducing it. And that's the paradox many mid-career professionals are facing. They did exactly what the system rewarded for years. And then the system changed without announcing that the reward structure had shifted. Rules didn't change overnight, but no one explained that the game had shifted. What this lens changes without a checklist. Okay, well, this isn't a call for panic. It's not a call to overhaul your career overnight. It's a way of thinking. Instead of asking, am I good at my job? Am I working hard enough? You need to start asking yourself, where does my role sit relative to decisions? Do I frame problems or only solve assigned ones? Am I closer to outcomes or to instructions? These questions matter more than any tool you could learn next. They change how you evaluate roles, opportunities, and risks. And they help you stop optimizing for effort when leverage has already moved elsewhere. Careers don't collapse because people stop trying. They collapse because effort is no longer where leverage lives. Understanding that difference and acting on it deliberately is the only career advantage that still compounds. And if this kind of analysis is useful to you, you might just want to subscribe. This channel is focused on helping people think clearly about what's changing and how to future-proof your career in the age of AI. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and keep showing the world that your best work is still ahead of you. And I'll see you in the next one.